Hi, my name is Nicole Waicunas, and I am the director as well as the creator of the New School of Innovative Learning. And it is an absolute pleasure to be able to share a story with you that is a true story. And I think it gives an insight into what we're really all about. It is a story about creating the new school before it actually came to be. And it centers on one of my former students whose name is Travis. And I think that it really exemplifies what the New School of Innovative Learning is all about through what we're all about, which is each and every student, the individual child. That is the center of our school. And the idea of our school is that every child is his or her own school. And that will make a lot of sense to you when you hear the story, which I love to tell because there's sadness to it and so much joy. So I hope that you enjoy it. Travis was a former student of mine, and he was actually a senior in my classroom. I taught literature in a high school, and I also taught ninth grade too. So this particular student, I always used to say the ninth graders and the 12th graders are really very similar in a lot of ways. And the irony also is that the differences and the similarities were actually all the same. The students needed so much and were afraid to ask for anything. But they always asked for you for what they needed if you were willing to look in their eyes and to spend time with them and to just offer even a quietness when you sat next to them or stood near them. I was notorious for creating lots of food in my classroom, mainly because I had a lot of students who didn't have what they needed. So breakfast was a never-ending stop throughout the day in my classroom. And Travis was quick to come by for a bagel or a donut or some fresh fruit and coffee in the morning. And I adored him. He always seemed much younger than his almost 18 years. And he had had a very rough life. And I knew that. I knew a lot about all of my students, and I made sure that I knew as much as I could possibly get from guidance on a daily basis. So Travis didn't go to classes, but he was always in my class. He was always tired and often didn't fall asleep, but kept his head down. And I had learned early on that the head down was severe depression. This was a child whose body weighed much more than it looked like because he was a slight frame, but dragging himself around the school took every single ounce of energy he could muster. By the time he would get to my classroom, he would just sort of fall into his chair, and he would put his head down with one arm kind of up, as though he was eternally raising his hand for help. But even if you called on him, he had nothing to say. So I would always ask him how he was, and I would put my hand on his shoulder to let him know I was available. I knew with Travis that what he really needed from me was a safe place to be. And that was what he could offer, was being in that safe place. And that was good enough. It was a very minimal chance of him graduating, and I was working behind the scenes to see if we could somehow make that happen. He was close to passing my class because I still had to use grades at that point. And I was looking forward to letting him know that he was going to be just fine. But we had reached the fourth quarter and he was all done. He was like a tired kitten. He was much younger than his years. Something had hurt him very much and had made it hard for him to focus at all during the day. So For the fourth quarter of that year in a public school, I had let go of curriculum with the blessings of my department leader because he knew that the seniors were all done. And I created the opportunity, which is in essence, the new school of innovative learning. Each student, and I had 108 that year, was given the opportunity by watching all these amazing human beings, which we call type 1 opportunities, from all over the place, from musicians to doctors to scientists, from filmmakers to, oh my goodness, chefs. We had photographers, we had newscasters, oh my gosh, yoga instructors, we had a Buddhist monk. I cannot possibly tell you all the different people that I had scheduled to come in and speak with and work with my students. And throughout these opportunities, my students were amazed. They were amazed at all these people who came to spend time with them and answer their questions. One of the ones that strikes me the most was a 96-year-old man who was actually brought in, not by me, but by one of my seniors. And he called me, my senior. He was coming in late that morning, he said, because he had a special guest. And I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "We'll be there as soon as possible." This was indeed a very special guest. He was one of the people who worked on the Manhattan Project. To have this person in your classroom with your students, it doesn't get any more extraordinary than that. He came in on my student's arm. My student's name is Freddie. And he came in with a manila envelope underneath his arm, packed full of something. My students, who I, of course, have been working with throughout the year, were starting to know who they were, and they were generous, kind, loving human beings who immediately got him the most comfortable chair, a cup of coffee, and some water, and the best donut that was left, and sat him down. They got as close as they could, and they waited for him to talk. Now, you would think when he introduced himself, and Freddie my student gave a little bit of information about who he was and that he worked on the Manhattan Project, the kids were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And when this gentleman started to speak, you could have heard a whisper. Word had already traveled up and down the hallway, and other kids had sidled in, and there was not an inch to spare on the floor. And he did not talk about what you would have thought he would have talked about. No atomic bombs, nothing like that. He took out the manila envelope with shaking hands and put it on his knees. And he said, "You know, working on the atomic bomb," and this was all he said, "changed me forever. When I moved home, I decided never again would I be involved in something like that. It hurt me that I had been part of that. So I became a peace activist for the rest of my life. I brought something to share with you, and it's very special to me." And very slowly he opened the envelope. You would have thought I had kindergartners in the classroom waiting to see a bunny or a puppy. What he pulled out of that envelope made my senior boys start to cry. It was pictures framed. It was his wedding picture and a picture of his wife. The wedding picture had a big crack down the middle of it. He started to pass them around the room. And he started to share stories about his beautiful bride who had passed away and how much he missed her. That was my classroom. Afterwards, kids came running that missed him. And they were so sad to not know more about this great man in their community. And I thought to myself, isn't this what school should be like? Meanwhile, Travis had an awakening in class. The students were all engaged, amazingly so, in their projects, which were completely and absolutely about things they loved, their interests, everything from dressmaking to food making, to opening their own restaurant, to photography. Oh my goodness gracious. I could, like the pictures in my head, I could speak for hours. To writing, a girl wrote her own book, to poetry, to artistry, to dancing, to writing a child who composed his own music for the piano. And we all got to hear him play. It was the first time we were his first audience. He was so frightened. All of these things. And Travis, one day, raised his head when he heard the word pizza. It was an awakening. And Travis heard the word pizza and he said, pizza. And the whole class stopped because they knew Travis and they felt for him, but they knew they couldn't reach him either. And I said, pizza, Travis? And he said, yeah, pizza. Waz. That was my nickname, Miss Waz, W-A-Z. Did you know that I make my own pizza? And that I make the best pizza in the whole world? And I said, Travis, I didn't know that. That's wonderful. And he said, you know what? I couldn't believe this was happening, by the way. He stood up and he said, I'm making pizza for our big extravaganza. That was what we had called the night when all the seniors would get together to showcase all the work they had done for the last quarter, all the research they had conducted, showcasing the best and the most beautiful aspects of who they were as people and what they loved to do. I said, Travis, that's a lot of pizza. And he said, I know, and I'll share it with everybody. So, of course, I said, yes. We got permission for him to use the kitchen downstairs. He rallied together a couple of people to be his co-chefs. And the irony was, the only sad part was I asked him to get a couple of teachers to shadow him to make sure he was okay in the kitchen. Otherwise, they wouldn't let him use it. Nobody knew who he was. It was like he had fallen off the face of the earth and nobody recognized him. Anyway, one of my dear friends agreed to work with him in the kitchen. That night, he was beautiful. He lit up the whole kitchen. He didn't even need to turn on a light. He had his chef's hat on and he had his apron on. And he made about 50 pizzas. And he made homemade chocolate chip cookies for dessert. And all the money he raised, he gave to a local shelter. He was really there that night. He was present. He was totally Travis. When I went in to see the end of the entire extravaganza, and a beautiful, beautiful art piece was delivered to one of our retiring teachers. And it had been created by one of her students as her finale. and he was crying and she was crying. Travis came down to deliver some roses to me, yellow ones, my favorite color. I said, Travis, that was so kind of you. How did you remember yellow? He said, Was. He said, you told me in 9th grade when I had you as a teacher that yellow roses were your favorite. And that was when I realized how important everything we say to kids, how important everything we say to kids really is. Travis is the new school. Every child is the new school of innovative learning. The new school of innovative learning is made for each and every child, no exceptions. Can't wait to tell you more about it and to share it with you, how it's going to change the entire world. That's how it works. One child at a time. Change the world. Thanks for listening, and I hope to meet you soon.